15th, Great Center, the Cincinnati Civil War Roundtable will have Michael Panhorst of Auburn, Alabama. Go Tigers. His topic will be the memorial art and architecture of Vicksburg National Military Park. I've been there. It's a great park. Not as good as Richmond's, but it's a great park. Tonight we're going to talk about the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky. We have a lifelong Madison County resident, Phil Siebert, a graduate of Model Laboratory School, Eastern Kentucky University. Yeah, Ken, people graduate from there. And the Mid-America College of Funeral Service. Now that's a good jump into the Civil War, isn't it?
It was a dead-end job.
After a 20-year career in the funeral industry, late 2007, Philip changed direction and accepted the position of Historic Properties Director for Madison County. Duties include management and proper interpretation of the properties relating to the Battle of Richmond and other Madison County park sites. Phil's active in Richmond's First Presbyterian Church, Richmond Masonic bodies, and many national, state, and local Civil War preservation and history groups. Someone had a question for you about that?
He's going to nail me when I'm done.
After your talk. He is also past president of Madison County Historical Society. He's been published in several Civil War periodicals. Boy, say that fast 5 times. And enjoys visiting Civil War battlefields and related sites. Philip portrays Federal Colonel William Link and Confederate Colonel Preston Smith.
Ambidextrous.
Okay. I was going to say ambivalent. Events relating to the Battle of Richmond. So I guess if they had a race, Colonel Link could outrun
Not at the end of the battle.
Oh, okay.
Link's Lane on East Main Street.
Yeah. He's program chairman of the Madison County Civil War Roundtable and is a member of the Kentucky Civil War Roundtable and Cincinnati Civil War Roundtable. He was elected as the inaugural president of the Central Kentucky World War II Roundtable in 2010. He served on the Kentucky Civil War Sesquicentennial Commission.
When Bernie O'Brien comes to hear I also owe a person in the audience an apology. And I think his name is Ken, I'm not really sure. But if you hadn't got caught with beer in your room, my father wouldn't have thrown you out of college.
He only caught me once.
So
I just got put on social probation.
But don't get caught with beer in your room. 1967. It is indeed an honor to come back up to northern Kentucky to speak to this august body. Got quite a few more people here than when it was here 5 years ago. I didn't make too many handouts. I apologize for that. But everybody should have gotten a newsletter. And did everybody get a boo-boo detector?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
A boo-boo detector. You never know when you're going to need that. It's refillable. I got 1,000 of them. It took me 14 years to fill those. Now we're going to talk about the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky. And it's the second largest Civil War battle in the state behind the 900-pound gorilla known as Perryville. How many Perryville fans do we have here? Okay, I'm going to make you mad right off. If the Confederates are defeated or stop at Richmond, there is no Perryville. But if the Confederates are defeated at Chancellorsville, there is no Gettysburg. If they're defeated at Second Manassas, there is no Antietam. So all these things kind of fit together. But one thing I've learned in studying the Civil War over time, and I hope most of you will agree with this, is these battles do not happen in a vacuum. You have to know what's going on at other places to understand what's going on. Was that your phone, Ken?
I just turned it off. I didn't
Social probation. We have a lot of fun at Richmond. For those of you all that have been there, we laugh a lot. done.
Where's your sidekick tonight? Did you throw him out
Who
of the
pulled the
car?
cord in your neck? I left him at home. I had a couple meetings in Lexington. I stopped and saw my sister who lives in Falmouth.
Oh,
So
okay.
Conveniently, huh?
So he was my advisor one semester.
you're that old. Well, we're going to start the talk off with setting the stage of how these armies get to Richmond, Kentucky. Who the major players are. You can't know the players without a program. You got to know who these people are. And then we'll talk about the battle itself and then the what we call the aftermath of what happened later on. Then we'll open it up for some questions. Is that fair enough? All right. But during the American Civil War, the summer of 1862 witnessed the Confederacy having success in the Eastern Theater and far less than spectacular results out here in the West. Now, in the East, Robert E. Lee and the new Army of Northern Virginia have repulsed George McClellan and the Army of the Potomac, or Potomac as it was said at that time, during the 7 days battles, and Lee is beginning his first invasion of the North. Got to stop right there for just a moment. Ladies, I will have to apologize to you. I will have to say a word during this presentation a couple of times that may cause you to be a little upset, but I will whisper it when I say it. Okay?
Well, then we're going to hear it.
You need to sit up on the front row. The word I'll have to say is brag, as in Braxton brag. We have a lot of fun at Richmond. But however, Confederate forces out here in the West have lost Fort Henry's and Donelson in northwestern Tennessee with over 10,000 much-needed troops and have been defeated in April at the Battle of Pittsburgh Landing, otherwise known as the Battle of Shiloh Church, resulting in well over 1,000 Confederates killed, including the Confederacy's overall commander in the West, Kentuckian Albert Sidney Johnston. P.G.T. Beauregard, the hero of Fort Sumter and 1st Manassas, took over Confederate forces, but was forced to abandon the vital railroad hub of Corinth, Mississippi, and retreat southward. This left nearly all of Tennessee and northern Mississippi in federal control. Confederate generals replacing Beauregard as the commander of the Army of Mississippi, and Edmund Kirby Smith, commander of the Department of East Tennessee, soon to be known as the Army of Kentucky, met on July 31st, 1862 in Chattanooga to devise a plan while there was yet still time for a brilliant summer campaign to rid Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and Kentucky of the federal occupiers. With 30,000 men, would quickly bypass, if you can use the term quickly and brag at the same time, quickly bypass federally occupied Nashville and march into west central Kentucky, thereby cutting Federal Major Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio supply lines, while Kirby Smith's 23,000 soldiers would advance in the east central region of the Bluegrass State, placing a significant enemy force on Buell's left flank. Kirby Smith, and you'll see his picture there, he didn't come out the best in your handout. He's a native of Florida, educated at West Point. He left for Kentucky from Knoxville on August the 17th. Concerned with the well-entrenched but poorly supplied federal garrison of 10,000 troops on his right flank at Cumberland Gap, Kirby Smith dispatched Brigadier General Carter Stevenson. I talked about Vicksburg, you got to know about Carter Stevenson. With 9,000 troops to keep those federal troops in check. Meanwhile, Kirby Smith's other 3 divisions slowly made their way through the drought-stricken mountains of southern Kentucky. Now, while all this is going on, Federal General Don Carlos Buell had received word of the impending Confederate advance and sent Major General William Bull Nelson, the most elegant and original swearer in the entire Union Army, to Louisville to see to the defenses of that important supply-laden city and to meet and repel any Confederate invasion of the state. Nelson, a 37-year-old native of Maysville, Kentucky, actually it's Washington to be technical, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate. Now, somebody remember to ask me about that, the Naval Academy graduate business, when we're done, because there's been some discrepancy with this. And not everybody understands that he's a graduate. And he's a Mexican War veteran, took command with his usual vigor, only to find the troops available for the defenses of Kentucky to be very inexperienced men, only recently mustered into the service from the states of Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, with sections of Michigan artillery. Most haven't been into the service 3 weeks. But Nelson had to command the men he was given. Now, not completely sure of Kirby Smith's intentions, Nelson sent 2 brigades under Brigadier Generals Malin Manson and Charles Cruft to Lexington and then on to Richmond with 7,000 men, with orders not to bring about an engagement without the surety of success. Now, in the interim, Kirby Smith's Confederate cavalry commander, Colonel John Scott, and his 900 troopers, mostly from Louisiana, reached Big Hill in southeastern Madison County on August the 23rd and routed the Federal 7th Kentucky Cavalry under Colonel Leonidas Metcalf. Scott did not pursue the Federals due to the appearance of Federal infantry in Richmond arriving from Lexington. Using the main north-south route known as the Old State Road, which is now US 25/421, Kirby Smith's lead infantry units crossed Big Hill on August the 28th and moved into Madison County and the Bluegrass region. Captain Alfred T. Fletcher of the 12th Tennessee recounted, "We pretty soon commenced ascending a very rough, high mountain. The road was quite rough most of the way, and what was not rocky and rough was shoe-deep in loose sand." Private Sam Thompson of Douglas's Texas Artillery Battery said, "The country is mountainous and sparsely settled, and poor people who have but little to subsist an army on. We are now short of rations." Now, Kirby Smith's 4th Division commander, Brigadier General Patrick Claiborne, you may cheer if you would, was in the lead, and he moved his men all night over Big Hill, with Brigadier General Thomas Churchill following with the 3rd Division. Kirby Smith's other divisional commander, Brigadier General Henry Heath, anybody ever heard of Gettysburg? Same guy. Was a good day's march south from the other 2 divisions. Claiborne, a 34-year-old Irish immigrant with extensive experience in the English Army and hailing from Arkansas, was a veteran of Shiloh, where he showed great talent and was the most experienced of Kirby Smith's divisional commanders. Churchill, a Jefferson County, Kentucky native, served as postmaster of Little Rock and had fought at the Battle of Wilson's Creek, Missouri. Claiborne moved his men within sight of Bobtown, just south of the little village of Kingston, when word reached him of Federal forces just north of the small village. Colonel John Scott and his cavalry had a rough scrap with Federal infantry in an area known as Muddy Creek or Rogersville, a little over a mile or so north of Kingston, and were being pursued by Federal cavalry. Scott had lost a mountain howitzer in that little fight, but led the unsuspecting Federals into a snare set by Claiborne's infantry at Joe's Lick Knob after dark on the night of August the 29th. Casualties are very light on both sides, but the Confederates did retrieve 30 breech-loading Wesson carbines. That's a gun you really don't hear about all that much. They got Cincinnati. Found strewn in the road with other equipment. Now, aware of the fight at Muddy Creek, Federal Commander Malin Manson sent word to Major General Bull Nelson in Lexington, informing him that the Confederates had crossed Big Hill in force. Nelson immediately sent, by courier, a reply back to Manson not to risk an engagement, but to move Manson's force to Lancaster, which would be about 25 miles to the west. Unfortunately for Manson and the Federals at Richmond, the message came too late, and a stage has been set for a confrontation. At 4 a.m. on Saturday, August the 30th, 1862, dawn had broken clear and cool, but it promised to be very hot. The region was in a terrible drought, and both man and animal wanted for water. Union Brigadier General Manson roused his troops, bivouacked at Rogersville, just north of Kingston. At 4:30 a.m., just as the first rays of the hot summer day dawned, Kirby Smith issued orders to Patrick Claiborne to move his division north from Bobtown and expect a meeting with the Federals around Kingston. Claiborne moved his division up the Old State Road toward Kingston. Claiborne's cavalry pickets ran into Union cavalry pickets at the Crooksville-Lancaster Road intersection with the Old State Road at 5 a.m., forcing the Federals back after a sharp exchange. Now, those who got a handout, if you get to the first map, at the very bottom, that's where we're talking about this fight gets going a little bit. And, now, receiving word of the cavalry skirmish, Manson sent word to his second in command, Brigadier General Charles Cruft, who is still in Richmond, to bring his brigade to Rogersville as quickly as possible. Manson marched from Rogersville toward Kingston looking for the Confederates. They will soon find him. Confederate cavalry scouts reported to Claiborne that Federal forces were in line of battle just south of a small brick church known as Mount Zion. Claiborne rode forward to get a view for himself. Manson had positioned 3 regiments on, from Claiborne's point of view, 3 regiments on the right side or east side of the road and 1 on the left or the west, with artillery in support a little ways south of the Mount Zion church. Claiborne immediately sent for his artillery and infantry to come up. He placed Douglas's 1st Texas Artillery Battery on a high ridge just north of the village within a mile of the Union position. At 7 a.m., Manson ordered his 8 guns of Michigan artillery to open fire on the approaching Confederates. Confederate Colonel Benjamin Hill. The enemy commenced a heavy artillery fire upon our line and village. Soon, Douglas's 4 guns were in position and answering the Federals. Sam Thompson said, "We opened fire on the enemy with 4 guns, 2 12-pound howitzers under 1st Lieutenant James Boren and 2 6-pound guns under 2nd Lieutenant John Bingham. The enemy turned all of their artillery promptly on us. They had much higher ground and appeared well sheltered in their position. The enemy lay down to our left and rear, out of danger from the enemy's guns, and the music of the 2 batteries rose to the grandeur of battle. Shells burst with great force about us, and their solid shots shrieked close to our heads with fearful accuracy." They don't write like that anymore, do they, Bernie? Federal artilleryman Lieutenant Byron Paddock said the Confederate shell began falling around us like rain. Confederate artillery struck the Mount Zion church during the fusillade. Knowing the battle was about to begin, Union surgeons had set up a hospital in and around the Mount Zion church in anticipation of the coming tempest. Now, after a 2-hour artillery duel, it's now the infantry's turn. Claiborne's division of Texans and Arkansans began moving up the right side of the old state road to engage the Union left. This is on the Army Depot property now. You can't see this area now. So if you ask me about it, I'll tell you why later on. But Claiborne and Kirby Smith had a little surprise for the Federals. They instructed Brigadier General Thomas Churchill to take his division west on the Crooksville-Lancaster Pike about a half mile to a ravine that travels north along a creek known as Mound Branch, and, most importantly, completely out of the Federals' line of sight. While Manson is becoming heavily engaged on his left, a near knockout punch is sneaking up on his right. Now, sometime while this is going on, Patrick Claiborne is severely wounded in the mouth and jaw. He's talking to another Confederate colonel, Lucius Polk, Leonidas Polk's nephew, and a very rude Yankee bullet comes through the air, hits him in his open mouth, takes out 2 to 5 teeth, depending on the account, and exits. How in the world it didn't hit his shoulder? I've yet to figure this out. And thus he can't talk anymore. And the commander of his division goes to Preston Smith, no relation to Henry Kirby Smith. Manson, sensing his left flank is about to be turned, ordered most of the 69th Indiana Infantry Regiment to support the other troops on the left side of the road, leaving only 3 companies on the right. These men witnessed nearly 3,000 Confederates, mainly from Texas and Arkansas, converge on their position from what is now known as Churchill's Draw. After a very short stand, these 3 companies of the 69th Indiana, probably no more than 200 men at the most, broke and the right flank of Manson's line collapsed. Now, General Cruft has now arrived on the field, and Manson ordered the 95th Ohio and then the 18th Kentucky into the fray to support the collapsing Federal flanks. The 95th Ohio charged on the right and were forced back with heavy losses. And unfortunately for the 18th Kentucky, they soon were alone in a sea of butternut, smoke, and blood. The Union's most experienced regiment was forced back with heavy losses. Now, on a rise a half mile north of the Mount Zion Church sat the stately home of Adam Rogers, known as the Rogers House. Now, if you're looking at the first map, it's at the very top where it says Rogers. As Manson and Cruft tried to stabilize the Union lines, this dwelling became a rallying and reorganization point for the battered Federals, whose wounded now packed the Mount Zion Church and Rogers House. and Rogers House just happens to be where my office is. Isn't that convenient? Now, knowing the Federals had been greatly demoralized and taken great loss of life, Manson ordered the Federals to retreat to the crossroads of the old State Road, Duncannon Speedwell Road, about a mile north of the Rogers House. Here, the Federals form a second line. You can move into our second map now. Major General Bull Nelson, now in Lancaster and not aware that the battle had commenced, heard the continuous artillery fire. I'm a little skeptical of that, personally, with this. To the east, and immediately set out for Richmond via Paint Lick on the Gary-Madison County border. Bull Nelson is about 6'4", 300 pounds. He makes this ride with one staff officer. We recently discovered what the name of his horse was. Anyone want to take a guess on this? The horse's name is Poor Horse. Okay. Back to our talk here. Just suck you right in, Bernie. The Confederates, being hungry and tired from their several days' march and the morning's heavy battle, did not actively pursue the Federals. They took quite a bit of losses in their officer corps during this early fight. But after a short respite, the Confederates moved upon the second line that the Federals made. The battle for Cumberland View had begun. Now, if you do any reading about the second phase of this battle, a lot of people call it the Battle of Senator White's Farm. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but there's a problem with that. It didn't happen on Senator White's farm. It happened on Alex Tribble's farm. And Alex Tribble lives in a home called Cumberland View. That's why this is the first time I've ever called the Battle of Cumberland View. Now, Cruft's brigade, including 2 unengaged regiments during the Mount Zion fight, formed the far right flank of the Union line, hoping to thwart the Confederate advance as they came upon another mansion known as Cumberland View. These Federal regiments moved forward and entered a whirlwind of Texas lead. These Federal units were severely bloodied and forced back, and the entire Union force retired in poor order for Richmond. The battle for Cumberland View ended about 1:30 in the afternoon on an unrelentingly hot August day. I have no idea why Cruft moved his brigade forward. This makes no sense to me at all. But he did. That's what happened. Now, an eerie silence descends over the battlefield, pierced at times by the screams and moans of the dying and wounded. Both Confederate and Union commanders plotted what to do next. The Federal troops were greatly depleted by battle and heat, and the Confederates likewise, but the momentum is definitely on the Confederate side. As the first of the Confederate troops came in sight of Richmond, they heard a rousing cheer go up from the retiring Federals. General Bull Nelson has arrived on the field. Now, finding the Federal force resembling a mob instead of an army, Nelson proceeded to form a third and ultimately final line on a rise just east of the city in front of a large stately mansion known to the locals as the Holloway House. Now, you can refer on to map 3 now. On this rise rested the dead of Richmond in the city cemetery. Here, Nelson positioned his troops in hope of fending off a Confederate advance until he possibly could evacuate his forces under the cover of darkness. Lieutenant James Cox of the 16th Indiana noted there was only a shadow of hope. Does that tell you that the debate has begun or something? Now, entering the outskirts of Richmond, Captain Paul Hammond of Kirby Smith's staff noted, "We found the enemy's encampment deserted by all but a few wounded men and the surgeons attending them." Proceeding further into the city, another Confederate noted, "They had the prettiest line of battle I ever saw. It was formed in a grove of forest trees, behind a fence. Their center was the outer edge of the town cemetery and commanded a view of 800 yards. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Now, not waiting for his artillery to come up, and this is kind of a unique thing about the Battle of Richmond, the third phase is it's fought with no artillery. Kirby Smith deploys his battle-weary forces on either side of the road entering the town and moved forward into the Federal line, which is mainly south of the turnpike. As the Confederates exited a large cornfield, very tall and full of ear, the Union line fired a wicked volley into them. The Confederate advance slowed due to the stiffness of the Union resistance, fences, and difficult terrain. Colonel Benjamin Hill said, "As we cleared a rise in the ground, The deadliest fire was poured into us that had occurred all day. And although the bullets hailed, our brave troops did not falter. A federal account reads, the Confederates reached a level clover field in front of our center when they received a volley deliberately aimed from behind our shelter. Without halting to return fire and with arms at right shoulder shift, the veterans of a dozen battles pulled their hats close over their brows, closed up their ranks, and pressed on, with lines as dressed on parade. There was something appalling in that steady tramp of their approach that carried terror into the heart of many a man whose first experience this was under fire. Wow. Pretty good stuff. Sergeant Henry Phelps of the 95th Ohio recounted, we fired briskly as the enemy advanced, but they did not scare worth a cent. As the Confederate fire increased in its intensity, the Federal right flank collapsed and broke. Finally, the entire Federal line collapsed from south to north, sending Federal soldiers skedaddling through the cemeteries and into the streets of Richmond beyond. And Indiana Corporal said, we were forced to give way, which we did with more speed than grace. Even General Nelson himself by now had received a wound in the fleshy part of his left thigh, but remained on the field, angrily chiding his troops as cowards. Despite Nelson's continued attempts to rally his men, the rout was on. The main street of Richmond quickly became a morass of men, horses, wagons, equipment, and ambulances. But the Confederate leaders had another surprise for the retreating Federals. Earlier in the day, Kirby Smith had ordered Confederate Cavalry Commander, Colonel John Scott, to execute a wide flanking maneuver west in order to possibly cut off any potential routes of escape for the Federal Army. Now with the Federals in full retreat and heading out of Richmond toward the Kentucky River, the Confederate cavalry lie in wait. With few shots fired, nearly the entire remnants of the retreating Army of Blue was captured en masse just north of the city. Does anybody know where exit 90 is at Richmond, where the Cracker Barrel is? That's what we're talking about. Cracker Barrel wasn't there. Bull Nelson was able to sidestep the Confederate trap and make it north. Some of the Union boys took another route north and made it to Winchester. Cruft made it to Winchester, but Manson was moderately wounded when his horse fell on him and he was taken prisoner. The Confederate victory is now complete, and the road north to Lexington and Cincinnati is virtually cleared of any organized Federal resistance. But now Kirby Smith has a problem. Over 4,000 Federal prisoners he was not planning on. Most of the Federal captured were kept in a makeshift stockade constructed of a fine ornamental wrought iron fence that surrounded the Madison County Courthouse, the very same courthouse that we use today. And that fence is the exact same enclosure that lines East Main Street in front of the Richmond Cemetery, the very same cemetery that witnessed such furious fighting late in the day. Over the next few days, the Federal prisoners were paroled or set free with conditions at the Mount Pleasant mansion overlooking Richmond. Most churches, schools, and many private residences became hospitals for the well over 1,000 wounded, both blue and gray. The medical personnel of both sides, along with local residents and their slaves, began the grim task of burying the dead. Commenting on the treasure trove of the supplies and equipment now in Confederate hands, one Texas soldier said, "Here I saw how they were being fed. Canned fruits of all kinds, condensed milk, the first I ever saw, cheese, and other edibles. They also had large quantities of clothing, shoes, hats, pants, all of which we put to good use. We were nearly naked. The pants I wore, coat I had not, were made of some thin material, and my canteen, haversack, and belt had worn holes in both sides, and in a very short time would have not have held together. I confiscated a pair of blue pants, a gray army shirt, a pair of excellent shoes, and hung my old ones out on a fence." Several of Kirby Smith's commands were able to rendezvous with Braxton Bragg and participated in the largest battle ever fought on Kentucky soil, the Battle of Perryville in Boyle County in early October, resulting in what I call a tactical Confederate defeat, and the Confederate columns now retreat back to Tennessee. Some of the Confederates withdrew back through Berea and back over Big Hill. Now the Battle of Richmond causes several events to occur. The Battle of Richmond resulted in Confederate troops occupying Lexington and the state capital of Frankfort, the only time a Union state capital falls during the entire Civil War. Lead elements of Kirby Smith's force reach as far north as Florence, Kentucky, causing panic in Cincinnati some 10 miles away. The Battle of Richmond is the only example of a federal force ceasing to exist when the battle is over. Basically, Nelson's entire command is either killed, wounded, or captured. All of the Union artillery, stores, equipment, and surviving animals were captured and put to good use by the Confederates. Total Union casualties were 206 killed, 844 wounded, 4,303 captured or missing. Confederate losses were reported less fully, but are generally accepted to be 122 killed, 519 wounded, and 3 captured or missing. I've yet to figure out how in the world you could be captured or missing at this battle and be a Confederate. But not all of the Confederate units reported their losses. Most of the Union dead after the Battle of Richmond were originally interred in the Richmond Cemetery, but in 1867 were reinterred in the new Camp Nelson National Cemetery in southern Jessamine County. Most of the Confederate dead are buried in a mass grave in the Richmond Cemetery, with a few buried at the base of Big Hill, near the ruins of the Maritones Tavern, with still others buried on Big Hill itself, the Berea Cemetery, and the Lancaster Cemetery. And I will now entertain any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Well, 2 questions. If I can start out. The one about preservation, but also one out of curiosity. Have historians been able to identify people who, say, took on the clothing of the other gender? Women disguised as men fighting in the ranks, or men in women's clothing? In the
There is somewhat some evidence. We had 2 women Confederate at Richmond. One got caught. And guess what she went? She went back to Texas, where she came from. But it's still very, as you call it, early in the game in our research of that kind of thing. So,
But the question I was asking about there about preservation.
Preservation efforts. Prior to 2001, if you came to Richmond, Kentucky, you saw 4 Kentucky historical markers. And most of them were wrong, because they're dealing with facts in the 1960s, and numbers change as you do more research and things. Since 2001, we have preserved approximately 600 acres of battlefield land. You put a little asterisk by that. We have put about 30 interpretive markers from one end of the battlefield to the other, and I made a deal to put up another one yesterday. We've opened a visitor center in a building that was there at the time of the battle. There's a certain feel about it that you cannot get in a modern building. That's not putting any place else down. It's just there's a feel about it. We are renovating currently another building, which will be opening sometime. And the 4 Kentucky historical markers are still up, and they're still wrong. That's okay. We did refurbish them, make them look a whole lot better. The Mount Zion Church is still active. It's an active congregation. We have a great relationship with them. It has been renovated on the inside, not extensively. So if you go in, you can tell, yeah, I see what they've done, but I understand what's going on here. They came in, the church was built in the 1850s. In the 1960s, they came in and put a basement in it. That's kind of remarkable how you can take a building, jack it up, and put a basement in. There's an account of the arms and legs went up to the windowsill. Well, the windowsill was closer to the ground then, too. And we only had 34 amputations at the battle to begin with. And one of them, I know where it happened up in town. So, you kind of got the little, that happens at every church, at every Civil War battle. So, part of the golf course that is there, the battlefield golf course is on the battlefield. Churchill's Draw, the natural terrain that we talked about, it has been preserved. It has not been interpreted yet, but you can go out and see it. And when you stand out there, you look here and you look over here, well, I can see what they're talking about. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and I said part of the battlefield is on Bluegrass Army Depot. We did have basically unfettered access to that area until recently. Their security levels have gone up. We don't need to talk about why. But does anyone know what is at the Bluegrass Army Depot?
What about it?
What's there?
Yeah.
It's called 700 tons of nerve gas.
There's chemical weapons.
Right. So, but when the chemical weapons are gone, which may be 10, 15 years from now, Bernie will still be around, the rest of us won't. And Bernie and I know each other, he knows I'm just playing with him. The Army is bound by congressional mandate to turn over 400 acres of battlefield land to us. So it's been preserved. The Rogers House Battle of Richmond Visitor Center was the commander's home for the depot when they took the property in the 1940s. So they preserved this home inadvertently. They turned it over to the county. Yes, sir, Bernie. Now I've got really
You may have said it, but somehow I missed it. Where exactly, or do you even know, where Nelson was captured?
Nelson isn't captured.
I thought Bull Nelson was. No?
Not at Richmond. Manson was captured.
Manson.
He's captured somewhere north of town.
Okay, I was...
Probably north of the Cracker Barrel, on the other side, the west side of the interstate.
And then he...
Nelson, the story is with Nelson, is that he is wounded. He is with the Union Medical Director, Bernard J.D. Irwin. And the story is, I don't know how true this is, but the story is that Irwin hid Nelson in a cornfield. This is after dark. Irwin surrenders, and then Nelson is able to get away. The Confederates think so much of Irwin that they let him go. I mean, they let him go. He comes to Cincinnati and gets medical supplies, and basically brings back 7 nuns from Sisters of Charity back with him to Richmond to treat the wounded. I mean, Richmond has maybe 250 residents at the time. It's a small, very small town. Yes, sir.
What was the story you were going to say about Nelson? I know he ended up being killed by another...
That's another talk.
But what was the story about him you were starting to say in the beginning? He went to the
Okay,
Navy.
Nelson goes, all right, Nelson is from Washington, Kentucky. All right, he was born there. We'll see how smart you all are. Bernie, you can't answer this. Bull Nelson is born in Washington, Kentucky in a home there that's still there. What Confederate general is born in the same house?
Albert Sidney Johnston.
Sidney Johnston. Why?
Midwife.
I don't know why they're born in the same house. What I think happened is they're 2 different generations. Albert Sidney Johnston's father was a medical doctor. Bull Nelson's father was a medical doctor. I think that Johnston sold Nelson's father his practice. It just makes sense. We're really good at doing jigsaw puzzles with hammers. It will work. It will. What we talked about now, Bull Nelson, he leaves Maysville, goes to the Maysville Academy. He goes to the Norwich Academy in Vermont. And then he goes to sea. 10 or 12 years, something like that. Well, the Naval Academy gets going in the mid-1840s, correct? Am I right? So Nelson is brought, he goes to the Naval Academy. So school starts and everything's all hunky-dory, but guess what else starts?
Mexican War.
It's called the Mexican War. The Navy is very short on experienced officers. So they go to the Naval Academy, pull out these guys who have a lot of on-the-job training, graduate them, and then bam, they go off the Mexican War. So he is a graduate of the Naval Academy, but he wasn't there 4 years. So that's why I'm saying it's right, but it's not the classic being a midshipman for 4 years and all that stuff. So, see how it makes sense after you delve into it a little bit more? Yes, sir.
What was the nature of the parole conditions at that time? Because they weren't keeping prisoners.
They weren't keeping them. Basically, you can go home as long as you don't fight again until you were properly exchanged.
Okay.
I have yet to figure out how in the world this whole thing is supposed to work.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a farm boy from Terre Haute, Indiana, and I'm captured at the Battle of Richmond, and well, you go on home now, and you go home, how are you going to know that you've been exchanged? I've yet to figure this part out. It just doesn't
But
make
wouldn't
any
you get
sense.
an email?
Next question. Yes, Bernie.
Right? Well, around this time, actually, some weeks after this battle, Wallace leaves Cincinnati, and he's in charge of a camp up in Columbus, Ohio, and it's a paroled prisoner camp, Union soldiers. So I don't know where they came from, they were quite, I don't know the numbers. It could be that some of them went
Possibly.
all the way up there. There was probably other camps like that, and other guys probably went home.
It's the strangest concept. Of course, it's 2015, we're used to things being done now. Well, they did things different then. And so.
Well, I wonder if it was done with the lists. They had lists of
Probably,
soldiers
but
and,
somebody's got to be talking to each other.
So
Can't send an email.
My
You know, they're going to have to be meeting up all this time.
great-grandfather was captured after, at Cynthiana. He was a fireman. They were activated as militia, and they took a 12-pounder down there. Kept the Confederates off the bridge. The Basil Duke split his forces and flanked them, got around behind them, and captured 89 men. And I didn't got my great-grandfather's weapons. They just put them on the next train home. And of course, they just became firemen and didn't fight anymore.
You're supposed to have a whole lot of honor.
There was. I wound up
It's
with
still
John Hunt
strange.
Morgan's card to visit.
It's still a
They must
strange
have-
concept.
They must have buddied up a lot.
We have General
He was a
Manson's
salesman, so
sword and his pistol and his wallet. He was captured. Why did they keep that? We also have two infantry tactics books. One on the inside of it is written in pencil, found on the field at Logan's Field, January 19th, 1862. That's Mill Springs. He's a colonel of that battle. The other book was his tactics manual that he had at Richmond, and it was dropped. A Confederate infantryman, probably from Tennessee, picks it up, turns to his friend, say, "Look what I found," and a bullet hits him in the back of the head and kills him. And there's an account of that written in this tactics manual. And yes, it's all locked up, and you can see it, but you can't touch it. So.
well, one of the stories from Vicksburg is where U.S. Grant, of course, paroled a great many Confederates, and then having lists of those who were paroled, found some of these so-called paroled Confederates were later captured again fighting against him, which, rebels are violating the parole agreement. This is why U.S. Grant says we will not exchange or release prisoners anymore, because we parole these guys, but then they go back into...
Well, I'm sure some of Grant's boys might have done the same. Yes, sir, Bernie.
Well, when does Heath actually comes up in this, to this area. Does he get there the next day or days
He
after
basically the
that,
next
or-
day, they bring up one of his artillery units, and they kind of protect the town, because they really don't know what else is coming down that road. No, from Lexington, they just don't know. Heath gets up there about August 31st, gets to Richmond, and then he's placed in charge of paroling prisoners. And Kirby Smith, of course, Patrick Claiborne, he stays in Richmond for a while because he's wounded. Preston Smith and the rest of the boys go, some of them go to Nicholasville and go meet up in Lexington. Want John Hunt Morgan story?
Yeah.
John Hunt Morgan story? The Battle of Richmond? John Hunt Morgan is attached to Kirby Smith's army, but he is not at Richmond. He's off gallivanting somewhere else. When they go into Lexington on September the 1st, the Confederates are dirty. And they've been on the march and kind of rough, even though they've gotten these Union uniforms and things, not all of them. Well, they march in, they're pretty much of a ragtag. Well, John Hunt Morgan gets to Nicholasville, knows what's going on, halts his men at Nicholasville. They all get a bath and new uniforms, and they go into Lexington the next day. They all pretty hard. Yes, sir.
I should know this because I went to Eastern, but...
When did you go to Eastern?
I graduated in '63.
Oh, good. My dad didn't throw you out of school.
But you're not very curious when you're that young. How are the markers wrong?
It's what it is. They said there's 12,000 Union soldiers there. There's only 7. You know, and it's just during the centennial they're putting up these markers, and they're dealing with information that's we've learned as time goes on is not as correct. You know, they're dealing with the facts they have at the time. So, all right, yes, sir.
In most general studies of the Civil War, you don't hear about this battle.
Mhm.
You said it was the worst destruction of a Union army
It
in
is
the
the
war.
most complete victory one side had over the other during the entire war.
Why don't we hear about that?
because we get overshadowed.
By?
There's another battle fought on the exact same days as the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky, called the Battle of Second Manassas or Bull Run. And I say that August the 30th, 1862 is the darkest day for the Union during the entire war. Because they lose an army at Richmond, they virtually lose an army with John Pope at Second Manassas. You know, it's not complete, but he's pretty well backed up. And when you have Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and Jeb Stuart 30 miles from Washington, who cares about what's going on in Kentucky? Right? Does that make sense? And then when the battle was over and the campaign is over, nobody talks about it. Kirby Smith comes back to Richmond in 1867 or 1868 and talks at the county fair. Never mentions it. You know, so what's going on here? And until 2001, there was basically 2 or 3, 4 words that you would say before the Battle of Richmond. It was, oh, by the way. And we're working to change that. We don't want to take anything away from any other battlefield, but we think that Richmond deserves its just due in the annals of what's going on. Because like I said, Richmond, you don't have period. Because I am thoroughly convinced, if you read anything about Bragg,
I was going to ask about it.
I don't think he ever would have come out of Tennessee, personally. Barney, I'm going to defer to you a little bit on that. I just don't think he would have come out. Because he's in Chattanooga when the Battle of Richmond's being fought. He hadn't even left yet. And he kind of forces him. You know, another battle that goes on, it's not as big a battle or anything as the Battle of Mumfordville. Well, guess what battle's fought the same day of that? It's called Antietam.
Yeah.
Guess what gets the headlines?
Well, and you said the relative distance to Washington D.C. also, that probably had a
All
lot
plays
to
into
do.
it. Yes,
What
sir.
about the civilian population in Richmond and that, what was pretty much their stance during that time?
I think Richmond was a lot like the rest of the state. They basically leave us alone. You know, Kentucky declares neutrality, which is a myth. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, you're either in the Union or you're out of the Union. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. It's one or the other. You can't have both. But Madison County is a heavy slaveholding county. The Rogers family, where the visitor center is, they had about 20 slaves, give or take, a little bit depending on the census. But John Hunt Morgan raids into Kentucky in July of 1862. He goes back and tells Kirby Smith that basically Kentucky is ripe for the picking. We go up there, they will flock to our cause, and they bring 20,000 rifle muskets with them. And when Perryville's over and they're going back to Tennessee, they're taking back 19,000. Now there is an inherent flaw in the whole thing. Neither Kirby Smith or Bragg have any serious number of Kentucky troops. I've always wondered if Bragg had John C. Breckinridge with him, would that have changed some things? I don't know. That's a conjecture. But he's very well thought of in the state.
Well, after the war between the states, obviously, those within Kentucky tried to make a big thing about Kentucky being very Confederate in its feelings. But as you say, during the record of the war, Kentucky mostly behaved as a very Union state.
Kentucky sends 4 to 5 times as many troops to the north as it does the south. But when the war's over and Reconstruction comes in, guess what happens? Kentucky is treated as a Confederate state with the Reconstruction policies. And Stephen Burbridge didn't help.
No.
So, bloody Bourbon.
Yeah. So.
Well, when the Confederates are after Perryville, the Confederate troops tend to concentrate around the Harrisburg or Danville area. They don't go back to Richmond. They head.
Well, some of them come back through Berea and go back over Big Hill.
Okay.
But now, how many? Couldn't tell you. Now, Patrick Claiborne's bunch does go because they were going to spike a bunch of guns before they could take them over Big Hill. He wouldn't allow it. And he got the Confederate Medal of Honor for that action, if there is such a thing. Thank of Confederate Congress or something like that. The Battle of Harrodsburg, Kentucky is the second most important battle that never happens. and Pipe Creek in Maryland is the first, in my opinion. You know, where the Union Army is supposed to fall back after Gettysburg if they get in trouble.
Wildcat Mountain was pretty significant. Wildcat Mountain.
But that was a battle that happened. This is a battle that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because Bragg basically backs up after Perryville and says, you want to play this game again? And Beale says, no. But Bragg's scared somebody's going to turn around and go to the south and cut him off from home. An inherent problem with the entire 1862 Kentucky campaign is nobody's in charge. Bragg outranks Kirby Smith, but he's operating in Kirby Smith's backyard. So thus they have to kind of get along with each other. They don't. Imagine that. And by the end of the campaign, it's termed as their relationship has become rather icy. And then Kirby Smith is supposed to command a corps out of Murfreesboro. And Jefferson Davis basically told him, if you don't want to go, you don't have to. And he doesn't go. And then he goes out west to Mississippi.
When Buell bypasses Bragg, makes it to Louisville, he reorganizes and he sends, I guess about a division under Still, and Still heads towards Frankfort. Do you or anybody in here know what Still does after he gets to Frankfort? Does he go into Lexington? Does he turn back to go to Buell? I've always been curious.
I think he goes back to term of Buell. But there are some Federals in Frankfort after Perryville.
Because Bragg and others were going to inaugurate the governor or whatever, and the Union troops come out, and they kind of skedaddle.
Yeah, they ruined the inauguration of Halls. They fired the cannon. That was not very nice. But even after that, because there's a scrap down there between the cavalry that's at Richmond under John Scott, some of these Union boys, at that Singing Bridge down there. Anybody know where I'm talking about? The Singing Bridge in Frankfort, down where the library is. There was some scrap down in there right after Perryville before they started getting after it. Because they're all afraid they're going to get cut off from home. That's what they're scared, cut the supply lines and they're done. Kentucky was in a horrible drought. It hadn't rained here in 3 months. And it doesn't matter where you are, it's awful. We have accounts of the Confederates shooing the cattle out of the ponds to fill the canteens. Wow. Real fun.
Hey, Phil,
Yeah.
You have one, really, I think, the best small museum in the state. And can you talk about, for those of us, some of us haven't been there for a while or have never been there, can you talk about what we'll find at your museum? I know I really like
It's free.
Your pamphlets. And
We take donations. The museum we have there is in the 1811 Rogers House. Was there at the time of the battle. Served as a wayside inn as well as their residence. Like I said, it was federal headquarters for about 12 hours, maybe, and then it was a hospital after that. When you come in, there's just, like I said, there's a feel about it. Most people that come to the Battle of Richmond don't know there's a Battle of Richmond. And it's kind of hard to describe to these people how you have 3 separate battles, but they're fought all by the same people. So we have a device there that no other Civil War battlefield has. Did you see this, Barry?
No, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen this?
Is that your big map?
Mm-hmm. We have a map, about the size of one of these tables here or so, give you an idea. And you go to other battlefields and they have these little fiber optic lights that'll show you what happened. Well, they're great, but it's very 1960s technology and they're mechanical nightmares. Well, we have the same thing, except we have lasers from the ceiling that come down and show you where things are. We call it Civil War meets Star Wars. But now, for a learned Civil War person who knows what happened at the Battle of Richmond, it just reinforces what you've learned. But for someone who has no idea what's going on, it really gives them a good. Have you seen that? Have you been there? You've seen that?
Yeah, Wes.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying because I'm one who wants to help do it. I like foolishness, but it really helps. I think every Civil War battlefield ought to have one. And if something happens enough that we need to change our story, we just reprogram the laser. So another thing we did is none of us are classically trained. As you heard in my biography, I'm an undertaker, 20-something years. But we started talking about all these names, Bull Nelson, Raymond Manson, Patrick Claiborne, and all these people, they are just like us. They're flesh and blood. Most of these people, if they were there the entire war, let's look at Braxton Bragg, for example. How often was he in a battle during the entire war? 2 weeks? 14 days maybe? Does that sound about right? You know, no more than 3 weeks? He has a life before the war, and he has a life after the war. And we're really big on telling these people's stories. So what we did is we started doing paper brochures on these significant people who fought at the Battle of Richmond. There's one on every general. Most, of course, most of them are officers, of course. Buildings. Just when was the Madison County Courthouse built? You tell these stories, and they're things that people can take with them. That's why you all got a handout, not a PowerPoint, because you can't take a PowerPoint home with you. When we got that project finished, we got to thinking, well, you know, Kentucky was a significant player in the Civil War. Now, were we Virginia? Well, yeah, we were. No. But, and we had some very big names that fought in the war that people don't know about. So we did, on the second floor, we did what was known as the Kentuckians in the Civil War series, where we had portraits made of well-known Civil War generals that are native Kentuckians. And most of these people, they don't know. Ladies, have you all watched the movie Gettysburg? You know who Sam Elliott is? See? All the women know who Sam Elliott is. Who'd he play?
I don't
He
know.
played a film.
I watched it, but I...
Well, it was Sam Elliott. So we
Didn't he
got,
look good?
well, I have no idea. All I know is if Sam Elliott says some woman's name, they turn to mush.
He looked really good.
Well, he played a fellow by the name of John Buford. Where's John Buford from? Woodford County. It's all these people, and they're John Bell Hood. Oh, he's from Texas. He's from Montgomery, Bath County line. His home's still standing where he was born. So we tell these stories about that. We took it one step further. When the movie Lincoln came out, of course, us Civil War buffs kind of peed all over ourselves. Lincoln is not a Civil War movie. You all do realize that. It's a Civil War politics movie. But it brought out some individuals and personalities that had been lost to history. So we started doing brochures on them, like Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy. I mean, he's really an important figure. Thaddeus Stevens was lost to history until the movie Lincoln came out.
Like the movie, Lincoln does depict a Kentucky congressman, despite his misgivings, he does vote for the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. I've seen the movie many times, but that guy's name eludes me.
It begins with a Y. Yuri Yates? Yates.
I hope, well, obviously,
He's out of Louisville.
he deserves to be remembered.
That's right. We went into some of these people that, you know, Verena Davis, Jefferson Davis's wife. Everybody talks about how nutty Mary Todd Lincoln was, whether she was or not. Well, Jefferson Davis has a wife too. And so we've done these brochures. We've got 80 some odd of these things there for people to take with them.
It's just amazing. I've never seen any museum put the effort on that kind of
And,
stuff that you
but
guys.
see, they're easy because the template's in the computer. I write it one time, it stays there. Every Monday I go through, and I get some of these, some of these, some of these. And I'm the highest paid paper folder in Madison County. But it helps to keep the memory of these people alive, and that's what we're about. Oliver Morton. Anybody here from Indiana? All right. You know who Oliver Morton is? He's the wartime governor of Indiana. If there were telephones then, when he called Lincoln, Lincoln would answer. I mean, he's one tough bird. And so it's just, we think it's kind of simple. I mean, we have pictures on the wall of soldiers that fought there. Is that my idea? No. Did I steal the idea? Yeah. I got it from mathematics. But it puts a face with what's going on. I was telling one of the other fellows earlier, had a fellow there Saturday, he was a good 80, 85 years old. And he got upstairs, and he was looking on the Union side, and he physically, I thought something happened to him. He saw his picture of his great-great-grandfather he had never seen before. I mean, he had tears running down his face. And, I couldn't give him the picture off the wall, but I said, you give me your email address, I'll get you one. And that's what we're about, is that. We've got a lot of Kirby Smith's descendants there, and we've had General Manson's descendants there, Cruft, Claiborne, and Bull Nelson didn't have any. So, after
Well, you've got a nice collection of Manson's things.
we were able to get up with some of Manson's descendants, and they gave us his sword, his pistol, and his epaulets for the ladies. We also have his china there. The story is that he carried this with him throughout the war. I'm a little skeptical of that, but it could be, it's possible. It's possible. Also, one of the rugs that he kept under his tent. He was a pharmacist in Crawfordsville, Indiana. We had one of the cabinets that was being used by one of the granddaughters as a china cabinet. Well, I think it was a cabinet out of his store, because there's a lot of fluid damage on the steps, on the shelves. I can't prove it, but it's one of those you hammer it. It just fits real well.
What else is Crawfordsville, Indiana known for?
Oh, some 2-bit off.
The Wabash College is there.
Okay, thank you. I saw that researching it. And for people who are taking the moment, it was Lew Wallace. Did they open the museum up there yet, Bernie?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Lew Wallace and Manson are political adversaries.
What was his documentary?
There. And I think they courted the same lady, too. And I think Manson...
They did, Susan. Well, I think Manson having, a steady job and an income, I'm pretty sure he courted a lot of ladies. But among those was the Susan Elston, who later Wallace marries.
We have 3 Arkansas governors at the Battle of Richmond. Churchill is elected governor in the 1880s. John Philip Eagle is elected governor. And another fellow named Harris Flanagan. Harris Flanagan is running for governor of Arkansas in 1862 while he's a member of the 4th Arkansas, charging into the Richmond Cemetery. He doesn't even know he's a candidate for governor. So that's kind of a neat little... And all battles have these stories. It's just ours have never been told, where you heard them at other places.
Are there any other, besides the ones that are connected directly to the battle, Richmond is such an old town, are there any other houses that are open for public display from the bigger history of
Yes, sir.
Richmond?
Irvington, which is close to Eastern, just on the other side of the administration building, it's open. Of course, Whitehall, Cassius Clay's home, it's open. If you
What a
remember one.
nut.
That was a firebrand if there ever was one. Not the boxer. I know that. Some things down around Berea. We're working on, like I said, the other house down where the reenactment is. Of course, we were working on it when you were there.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get it open here next year or so.
Still figuring out what's going to be there, or what?
No,
Okay.
trying to find out where the money's going to come from.
Oh,
Do they still do the one, I went to Whitehall and saw a person do a performance
Of him?
They still do
I
that?
think, as far as I know, they don't do that. That's kind of an allied site. We tell people how to get there, but I don't really know. I think so. Of course, we got Fort Boonesboro. Go down there and see Daniel Boone. Fess Parker's not there. He's a team's out. So, Madison County has a lot going for it. We're one of the first counties in the state. And the name for James Madison. That was another thing we did, and I know that you
Or
all
was
from
it
several.
named for Christopher Madison, who was an early governor of Kentucky?
It's named for James Madison.
Okay, but Madison Avenue in Covington was named for Christopher Madison.
Yeah. The first 5 streets in Covington are the first 5 governors of Kentucky.
Right. Another thing that my office did anything to do with Civil War is in the courthouse, we did brochures again on famous Madison Countyans. And people can pick it up and take it with them. And I mean, you can do famous Boone Countyans. This isn't rocket science. You need to have one on the sheriff of Boone County. Everybody needs one of those. or Kenton County, whichever.
Recommend.
You know, people, when we did it at the courthouse, I thought I'd have to check the rack once a month. I'm checking it once a week. You know, 'cause we've got some pretty significant, Daniel Boone, Squire Boone, Cassius Clay, Tony Snow, on Fox News. You know, Kit Carson, Madison County. Okay, I've talked enough, they stood up, so get out of here.
Lee Majors?
So we got.
Well, he lived there, but he wasn't Lee Majors at the time, he's Harvey Yeary.
He was when I was there, a freshman, he was
Yeah.
at Specs Bar, you know, and he was up there and nobody was paying any attention to him, and somebody said, "You know who that is? That's the guy from the Big Valley, Lee Major."
They had a big Specs reunion
Oh, really?
a couple of years ago,
Wow, okay.
and I wanted to go down there with a sign that my daddy threw me out. How many big students go out of school because of Specs?
Oh, my God.
But thank you all for having